Uh, Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar on state of governance in today's world of business. This is Mona Lisa Bhagat. I'm a manager with Rispro India. We wish you all a very happy new year. Due to some unforeseen circumstances, our today's speaker, Mr. Robin Banerjee, would not be able to attend today's webinar. However, we have our own founder and director of Rispro India, Mr. Manoj Jain, and principal of Rispro India, Mr. Lakshmi Gupta, who would be enlightening us today on the topic. I would now like to hand it over to Mr. Lakshmi Gupta. Hello. Lakshmikant, sir. Sorry about that. Just give us a moment.
Are you able to hear me? Okay, okay. Okay, thanks. Huh? So I should start now, right? Okay. Yeah. Hi. Hi, I am Lakshmi Gupta. Uh, Good afternoon to everyone. And we'll just start this session on the current state of corporate governance. Uh, while starting this, of course, this basic introduction as is given, like I have roughly 18 years experience into the this relevant area of governance, compliance, internal audit. Plus, I've worked with the financial services majorly into the risk and compliances, and I have been into all the areas and given a lot of training on this KYC, AML, and the independent directors and credit and market risk. So let's come to the main presentation. I'm not sure why slide is not changing. Yeah, this is a slide showing a cricket match. I hope everybody can see this, and you will understand that okay, this related to the final match of last World Cup where New Zealand and England played. Ultimately, the winner was England. You will bother why this cricket match is coming over here when the talks are about corporate governances. There's a lot of synergy between these two as far as look at the rules, regulation, and approach. We all are aware that how England won this match based on certain rules which went out detrimental to New Zealand without anything specific on a level playing field. The rule was that okay, number of boundaries. The tiebreaker was the number of boundaries done in last 50 overs. On that rule, definitely because New Zealand had played the first, and this rule was not expected to come up. So ultimately, New Zealand lost in this. Many of us definitely felt that this rule was not on the equitable basis to all the stakeholders, to all the audiences, to all the teams, to the nation. So definitely that's where the issue of corporate governance comes. Basically, that's where the point comes. The governance relates to having a governance norms, governance rules relates to having rules, regulations, and procedure, which is for the benefit of all the stakeholders and giving equitable treatment to all the stakeholders. And that's where this particular match of England New Zealand is a very good example as a logic and as a logical interpretation. This is most of us might have received this on the WhatsApp, but it clearly shows that where the governance is coming from. One is something called corporate governance, other is inner strength. If our inner strength says that, okay, let's abide by the rules because the traffic police is sitting ahead and he will uh, just cut a challan and ask us to pay fine, then this is not right. We should abide by the rules to avoid the accidents and to keep everyone safe, not only us, but everyone safe. And that's where the question of inner instinct comes. So it's not the corporate governance, but also it is the inner governance among each of us, because corporate is a fiction. There is nothing as corporate to whom we can feel, we can touch. Corporate is made up of the human beings, whether a person is on the board, at the senior management, promoter, or at the employee, whoever is it. Ultimately, its inner instinct of everybody forms the overall governance structure of the corporate. Now, here we should fasten our seat belt, not just to avoid challan or not just to avoid injury to ourselves, but we should, or it's not enough to have fastening of the seat belt. The idea is to avoid any kind of accident. So just fastening seat belt is not enough. We all needs to take care of the signals rules, traffic lanes. Now, as a logical interpretation of this, it's our inner instinct we should always work, that we should work, our routine should, or the way of we do business, all of these should be in line with the overall objective of overall benefit to the all stakeholders. It's not just to us, but to all the stakeholders. Here, of course, identification of stakeholder is a must, because who are our stakeholders? We each and every employee should be able to identify, then only he can do proper governance within his area of activities. Now, the buzzwords are like ESG and GRC. Both of these words are not complete unless G is there, unless governance is there. Environment, social, and governance risk, because of the our environment issues also happening, social issues, and definitely governance is also a part of it to complete ESG. Within GRC, G comes first because once governance is there, then having risk and compliance has any relevance. But if governance is not there, tone from the top is not there, inner instinct is not there, then risk and compliance also gets compromised. If we look at the definition of misconduct, which is much broader definition from anti-governance perspective, which will cover all the situations from the, let's say, bad behavior or deliberate violations to frauds or any other violations. Misconduct is also explained by World Bank in various guidelines on anti-bribery. It actually relates to fraud plus corruptions plus collusions. Now, collusions may be with the vendor collusion, maybe a distributor collusion, maybe lender collusion, vendor collusion, lender collusion, or distributor collusion. These ultimately leads to overall misconduct. Now let's see a little more in depth as to what corporate governance means, and thereafter we'll go into depth into what is the current status and what are happening in the corporate governance side, one from the rules regulations side and other from the actual cases side. From rules regulation side, corporate governance is a combination of rules, processes, and laws by which a business is operated, a company is operated, keeping in mind the stakeholders interest, all the stakeholders interest. Now this is the list in the first bullet point in the bracket. There is a list of a few stakeholders here. However, if we have to keep in mind all the stakeholders interest, each and every employee needs to choose his own list of the stakeholders. Within this list, his own list of the stakeholders, that who is his stakeholders. At the board, positioning of the board is like a stewardship to the shareholders. Whereas per corporate governance, board is at the fiduciary capacity to shareholders. He is having a stewardship position to the shareholders, and to perform his duty well for the overall benefit and running of the company, the board sets rules and regulations and procedures, keeping in mind the shareholders' stake and interest. Main pillars of the governance are definitely the transparency, accountability, transparency in the whole process of the governance, not hiding the important and relevant things from the shareholders, being accountable, each official senior management to be accountable, equitable treatment, I explained, independence wherever it is required, may it be on related party areas, it be on the compliance officer, risk management position, internal auditor, or statutory auditors, and adequate disclosures. As per the overall various laws, Companies Act, corporate laws, plus international World Bank's guideline, UNDP guidelines, and various forums, the common points coming in relation to explanation of corporate governance are, first, there is a system of rules, practices, and processes by which company is run. Here, this will include the policies and procedures, framework, ethics, etc., and other policies relating to managing conflict of interest, gifts, entertainment policy, hospitality, travel, lender collusion. Gifts, entertainment, hospitality, travel is a very important area, as many a times this become the root cause of the conflict of interest, and which itself is a mother of various non-governance issues. The other common points across the definitions of corporate governance, as I mentioned, are generally that there should be rule of law, transparency, accountability, responsiveness of the corporate, sound policies and procedures. When I say sound policies and procedures, it talks about not to skip any relevant procedures. The follow the process manuals properly, anti-bribery, anti-corruption measures, keeping in mind for the companies which have a international connection side in business in some or the other way, keeping in mind the regulations relating to Foreign Corrupt Trade Practices Act. For India, it's Prevention of Corruption Act, alerts given by Department of Justice of USA in respect of the anti-bribery related situation, World Bank's internal compliance program, intensive compliance program. In the current COVID like situation, this is a very important area because many companies have been running and in race of getting the approvals from the authorities for vaccinations. Definitely there are a lot of chances of corrupt practices happening. You can Google check even the cases like Novartis is one of the case where is very important, which was very recent in the month of in the year 2020, where Novartis was fined because its subsidiary paid briberies to the international governments like Korea, Vietnam to get certain regulatory favors and to have their products sold to them. From Indian perspective, if you look at the background of the corporate governance and the board structure, Irani committee you might have heard initially during 90s. Irani committee mentioned that nominee director is a separate position from independent director. Nominee director cannot be independent. But after that, Kumar Mangalam Birla committee came up with its guidelines, which said that no, nominee director is as good as independent director. Companies Act 2013 ultimately made it a law that nominee directors are separate from independent directors because independent directors definition is separately laid down under section 149. Kotak committee is the recent committee which Uday Kotak committee which further recommended a few guidelines for corporate governance within listed company. Many of these were implemented if we see SEBI LODR regulation 2018, which has I mean 2018 it was amended in respect of these pointers like separation of chairman and MD position, minimum number of directors and listed companies is increased to 6, so there is a diversified profile within the board structure. The not to have alternate directors in place of independent director, so that there is no misuse of the independence of independent director. Gender diversity, disclosure of changes in financial indicators became mandatory, like certain basic turnover ratios, leverage ratios, profit margin ratios, and trends into these are made mandatory as a disclosure, mandatory points of disclosure. Training of directors was one of the requirement under LODR, plus Ministry of Companies Affairs, you might be aware, that has come up with the certain guidelines in relation of certification of independent directors. Board related frameworks as of now, as per the current rules and regulation under Companies Act and under SEBI LODR, it talks about a woman director, one third to be independent director, separate meeting of independent directors apart from the minimum 4 board meetings. Clause 2(4) of Schedule 4, basically Code of Independent Director under Schedule 4 of Companies Act, it says that the independent directors needs to satisfy about overall integrity of financial information and that the financial control and risk management systems are robust and defensible. So there is additional responsibility by Companies Act on independent directors that they should also be satisfied with the robustness of risk management. Liability of independent directors, that okay, they will be liable for any act or any omission, commission or negligence showed by independent directors or any approvals which has gone through the board processes, to show that the independent director was not aware of certain violations or certain decisions taken which was in violation. He has to prove that the decisions were not taken with his consent or connivance, or the decisions have not gone through the board process. Here, having a compliance certificate placed before the board, if there are 20 items in that compliance certificate, then independent director cannot deny that there that he is not aware of the violation in any of those 20 points. For this, independent director is supposed to question, supposed to have doubts, make question, object on the matter, and go in depth wherever he has doubt, and he should ensure that these things are minuted. Additional disclosures for directors' reports were also provided as per this SEBI LODR requirement in relation to risk management policies. Audit committees are given different additional power in relation to approval of related party transactions, scrutiny of certain intercorporate loans and investments, and evaluation of internal finance control. Vigil mechanism also is provided under Section 177, which relates to whistleblowing for listed companies or the companies which have borrowed from the financial institutions or depositors above a threshold, say 50 crores. They have to have their whistleblowing policy. It should be on the internet also, apart from intranet.
One point, Lakshmikant, on this, we have seen a couple of slides
Yeah,
relating to independent directors. We have
yeah,
seen them relating to, diversity and things like that. So
mm,
where do you see is the focus of the
yeah,
regulations? I mean, on one side, we see there's a lot of focus on independence. So essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to contain the management and making sure that they work in the interest of the shareholders, the stakeholders involved. And the other
mm,
angle is they're trying to focus on qualifications of directors. So things like SEBI's recent guidelines on, or even RBI's guidelines with respect to chief risk officer should be FRM,
yeah,
PRM certified, or the SEBI saying
yeah.
that risk management committee should have qualifications. So essentially, I think where the corporate governance is going is really around making sure that we are containing the conflict of interest in the management and also putting quality people to drive companies. Is that the direction of various regulations, or is there more hidden agenda behind these changes?
Yeah, that's definitely the direction. In fact, to a great extent, even regulators evolve over the time, and ultimately the purpose is to have a more evolved management, persons at the helm, persons in the management, the persons who are in the control functions like risk management, compliance, and even the independent directors who are generally considered as the regulators person or the officials who is controlling the company's affairs. They are supposed to be little more skillful, little more knowledgeable, and to just enhance their skills. Definitely those evaluation criterias are laid down at various places so that they can function in a better way and more skillful way and more sharpened way as far as executing control functions at the board level, as well as at the risk management level, as well as at compliance levels. And that's where SEBI is definitely going. Even if you look at the cyber security norms, there also it says about the involvement of the board, and even the board directors report also should talk about the cyber security risk. So definitely they want the company's top management, including independent directors plus risk management, to be aligned towards controlling cyber risk. So it's a direction towards really getting everybody enlightened towards risk and controlling those risks.
And also another thing, so by the way,
So
this is Manoj on the call in case, some people have joined. I'll be taking a session, a small session after Lakshmikant finishes. But one point, Lakshmikant, if you go back on your previous slide, so there is the
yeah,
audit committee is a mention. If you go back up, so
yeah,
as we read a lot of regulations, as we read a lot of changes, we are realizing that more and more powers are given to the audit committee. Things like related party transactions, that you have on the slide. Now that's a very big area
mm,
on its own. So don't you think there is
yeah.
now more concentration in less number of people who are involved? I mean, do you think that's a lacuna, or are there any issues in this kind of a setup? So essentially, previously, what the board used to decide possibly is now the audit committee deciding, and suddenly audit
Yeah,
committee has assumed such a big role, an important role.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. In a big conglomerate, say if it is a one standalone company, related party transaction may not be a very big issue unless there is a selection of some vendor related to the promoters and all. But still, in a standalone company or a smaller company, it may not be a bigger issue. But once the company goes listed or in a conglomerate, let's say, always there are multiple companies. With the multiple companies structure, what happen? The companies can be used as a vehicle for some other payouts or for transfer of profits or transfer of losses, tax evasion. For example, the briberies may be paid by one of the subsidiary, or briberies may be paid out by one of the associate who is paid by another associate and paid by the main company. So many a times related party transactions are misused, and it may become prejudicial to the stake shareholders of the main company, because whenever there is a win-lose situation, say related party transaction may lead to the win-lose situation, that one party wins, other loses. If you transfer profit, shareholders of one company loses while other company loses. One company loses while other company wins. So wherever there is a win-lose formula, there is a conflict of interest, and related party transaction will lead to improper practices, basically, whether it relates to transfer of profit or overbilling or over invoicing or tax evasions, or it may relate to bribery. Even the tax evasion, like government loses at the benefit of the promoter, because the profits may be transferred to other company which has unabsorbed losses to set off against that. So if the government loses, again it's a win-lose situation, and it's ultimately a social risk. So related party transaction in a conglomerate is a very big area, and a very big area of misappropriation of funds, and that's where the powers are transferred from the executive director, the main board, towards audit committee, so that it can be checked from the independent perspective. And that's definitely an area which opens related party transactions, definitely area which opens a lot of governance issues. uh, as per the current governance structures, like there are three lines of defense. Probably all of us might be aware that one is each of the functional heads who himself is the owner of his function and risk manager of his function, and should ensure that he is functioning as per the best interest of all the stakeholders of his department, of his function, plus of the company. Second line of defense is independent risk management compliance function, including independent directors also, we can say. Third line of defense, internal auditor. Of late, if we see in the current situation, in let's say last 2 3 years, starting from, let's say, going back to ILFS case within India, if you have gone through the newspapers, in fact a few of the promoters of such companies which has seen the misappropriation of funds, they started saying that there should be fourth line of defense, because internal auditors did not function well. Statutory auditors should be fourth line of defense. But definitely, somewhere the CA Institute as well as the statutory auditors, a few statutory auditors came up very well, saying that statutory auditors are appointed by the shareholders and not by the corporate board. So definitely statutory auditor are independent reviewer, but cannot be fourth line of defense. So the best way is that instead of searching the fourth line of defense, as we have seen in last 2 years, it is better to strengthen the first three lines of defense for the best corporate governance. Gifts and entertainment, as said, that conflict of interest may be the mother of various misconducts and frauds, and gifts and entertainment may be a very good impulse for that actually. Ultimately, it may increase the conflict of interest. Conflict of interest is basically a situation when there is a win-lose, as I mentioned. But if there is a win-win, because in related party transactions, or many a times there is a win-win also. If two parties transact together and it is a win-win for both the parties, then it is not a conflict of interest, it is leveraging the contact, it's leveraging the relation. So the idea is that, okay, company can do related party transaction, but for leveraging the benefits for each other, and not just for conflict of interest, and not to prejudice one stakeholders and for the benefit of another stakeholder. And this test of win-lose or win-win, this should be done very thoroughly by the audit committee while approving any while passing any making any decision. And that's where, see, this is little more in granularity, but this may create overall structure and stronger pillar for corporate governance structure in the organization. Fraud, as I mentioned, gifts may lead to the conflict of interest, which may be the mother of all the frauds. This is, we all know, the Nero Modi's case, PNB. Again, we say one side, we say that okay, as a part of the risk management controls and compliance, there should be least access to be given to the system to at all the levels. That okay, a person, if he needs only read only access, he should be given read only access. If other person needs read and write both the access, then he should be given read and write access. But this is a case when the persons at the top, at the promoters at the top, the privileged persons are given the privileged rights of access. Then and then that's where then his own inner instinct, the person's official's inner instinct works for the defense of the corporate governance. He should not himself go at the midnight to some and open some Swift mechanism, do login password, enter login password, and transfer certain funds to his own related party, to his own related company or shell company. So that's where is the issue. Wherever the privileged accesses are given, there is definitely a question to whom it is given and what is the overall background. Of course, it is a difficult question because many a times promoters themselves are involved. And as a lender or as a private equity fund financier, you can do a background check of the investee company. It is easier, but as an employee or as an internal auditor, it is sometimes very much difficult to really look into these areas. But and of course it is a challenge. That's where we say that tone of the top is the most important for the ultimate defense of the governance. The other cases of the fraud are accounting frauds like overstatement of profit and assets. All these five cases mentioned here, Enron, Satyam, Tesco, ILFS, Toshiba, all of these had the same thing, that they created rosier pictures by overstating assets and profits and understating the liabilities and the losses. Even the Lehman crisis happened, but before that, the junk bonds of Lehman was shown as the good quality bonds. So those are again overstatement of the assets. Baring's case is a very good learnings in 1995. Without going into depth of the story, I will just come up to the learning. This case is a very good learning on the combination of fraud plus combination of derivatives risk plus corporate governance. Here, first of all, the concerned official Nick Leeson was in charge of front office as well as back office. That's where is the biggest flaw of the organization structure, and governance failed over there. Secondly, he was allowed to use trading error account 88888. Thirdly, the internal auditors alerted that something fishy is happening in this trading account 88888, but internal auditors completely ignored this. Completely ignored the alerts. Sorry, the audit committee completely ignored the alerts of the internal auditor. Why board is completely ignoring? There are two reasons. First of all, the governance of the board itself, due to the high profile nature of Mr. Nick Leeson, the board was unable to hear and take action against him. Secondly, board themselves did not understand the derivatives properly, so ultimately they have to take Nick Leeson at the face value. So the issue is about the training of the board, the learning of the board, not understanding derivative structure, still allowing Nick Leeson to take derivatives position, ignoring internal audit observations, and allowing Nick Leeson to head front office as well as back office. So all of these ultimately are the learnings relating to the fraud, not understanding derivatives or corporate governance issue. When you do not understand derivatives, you should not allow such trades to happen. This is showing the way interest rates fell from 1987 till recently in United States. Now, why I came to interest rates here? This interest rate fall talks about the opportunities many corporates and the investment bankers got to make profit out of their risky transactions, hedge transactions, or fixed income transactions. And this created the greed. This greed ultimately led to the fall of hedge funds and Lehman Brothers fall. So interest rate falling, over leveraging in over due to the greed, going into the subprime assets, then window dressing subprime assets into the good assets. Ultimately, somewhere housing bubbles happened, which led to the bad debts and ultimately fall of the Lehman. All these show that okay, somewhere greed and conflict of interest are the mother of all these frauds happening and governance issues happening. Other aspects, as I mentioned, is the bribery, corruption, which also includes areas of facilitation, gratification. These are definitely, as I mentioned, that during COVID time also, there are cases. One, as I told, Novartis, plus there are two more important cases within pharmaceutical industry, and one of the case relates to straight away getting the regulatory favors, trying to get the approvals from the regulators for the new doses, new medicines created by one of the pharma companies. That pharma company bribed Russian and Turkish government officials. So definitely these are very important, especially in the current scenario also, and from the governance perspective also. There should be adequate structure of anti-bribery, as laid down by FCPA, Indian Prevention of Corruption Act, plus Department of Justice. Various regulations worldwide are there to tackle with the situation of briberies, corruptions, as well as anti-money laundering as well. But of course, some or the ultimately whatever rules, regulation, law you make it, ultimately you can strengthen control procedures, but tone from the top is very much important, so that we all implement this law, comply with this law, and do not violate this law. Board and governance effectiveness, one or two important points, as I mentioned, that a certification of independent director, as I told, training of independent directors. Second last point, compliance certificate by compliance officer, saying there is no major audit observation, no major compliance observation. This, only this much is not enough. This will put independent directors and the whole board at the risk. It is better to have more questions on the compliance certificate rather than taking as a paper in the whole agenda booklet. The last item, compliance testing and testing of control. This is very much important from the governance perspective, so as to ensure that the audit committee, risk committee, and the board objectively makes decisions and objectively makes judgment over the governance structure of the company, because there will be compliance testing report from independent reviewer. Those compliance testing and the effectiveness of those testings are checked by the independent reviewer. This compliance testing is different from internal audit and different from concurrent audit. These are basically testing from the angle of only compliances. It may be documentary compliances, it may be the actual checks, and in relation to the event based actions, or let's say prevention of insider trading or whistleblowing related. So this is a little bit different. Of course, at Risk Pro also we are active into this area. So this is very much important apart from the internal audit and the concurrent audit. Whistleblowing, as I mentioned just now, is one of the important area which we have seen in the recent past last 2 years. Most of the fraud have come up because of the whistleblowers. Whistleblowing is very strong. Whistleblowing mechanism reduces the fraud losses by 1/3. How it reduces? First, the existing running continuing fraud is stopped. Secondly, strong mechanism of whistleblowing stops the another potential fraud. The another fraudster will not dare to do fraud because of the strong whistleblowing mechanism. Take example of this PMC Bank. 44 employees, officials of the credit risk department of PMC Bank, went to RBI straight away to make a complaint, to blow the whistle, and told the whole story of what happened there. So having a very strong whistleblowing mechanism is very much important as a part of the governance. It's not just fraud prevention, but as a part of the governance, because it will help the board to ensure the weak links within the overall governance structure. Manoj, if you can add up something more.
Yeah,
Manoj?
sure, definitely. So I think the overall presentation has flown well. That it does touch upon important aspects when it comes to corporate governance and the state. Clearly, the indicators are that this is very fluid in terms of direction, and a lot of changes are expected to take place. In the areas of corporate governance. So I'll just touch upon one or two points and then open it up for any questions and answers. Just give me a second. I'll take the presentation. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen now. And I just wanted to touch upon, so essentially, my name is Manoj Jain. I'm the founder director of Disclose. So I'm just kind of concluding a session on corporate governance. So just touching upon why it matters. So while Lakshmikant has addressed the points around, what is the current state, what are the regulatory changes, we can also look at why it matters. And let's look at some of these simple terms which kind of make all the difference. So they look simple in a sense because they're regularly heard, they're regularly understood, but we don't know the implications that are behind these and what are the consequences behind these simple terms. For example, financial integrity. Now there are lots of regulations, lots of regulator focuses is there on ensuring that there is financial integrity, the ability of a concern or a company to have a profitable business so that its stakeholders are not taken for a ride, and there are returns to them. So sorry, Lakshman, your webcam has come on.
Okay, I'll just.
Yeah, sure. Okay,
Okay, you
so
continue. Okay.
yeah, okay, fine. I'm just checking something. Yes. So, and then that's, financial integrity is one aspect that is clearly very important. Things like bribery, corruption, again, a very renewed focus on this. In fact, a lot of regulatory changes are happening in this space of making sure bribery and corruption is tackled. Things like whistleblower, harassment, ethics, code of conduct. These are terms that we understand very loosely. Okay, a company is very ethical. What is ethical? It's not defined well. It is not construed well. It is not set up as a process well in the company. But the expectation is that if there is no ethics and integrity, then the companies are generally going to collapse. So the point that we're trying to address here is regulators take each of these boxes and they make sure that they have strong regulatory environment to contain and control each of these terminologies. And that's the focus of corporate governance, is to make sure each of these definitions, each of these words have some ground of control about how a company runs and how a company is ultimately governed. Now I have two slides, maybe a couple of years old or in general, but essentially these again give more examples of frauds, of corporate governance lapses, and the shortcomings that are there. So in this case, ABB had suspected fraud in South Korea, and the auditor concludes the company failed to maintain effective internal controls. So if you go back to the definition of corporate governance is a set of processes and policies and things on how companies are managed. It translates into internal controls. So by default, if you have bad internal controls, you have bad corporate governance. So this is one area where we conclude that corporate governance was lacking. And essentially, in this case, the issue was around not having strong segregation of duties in the treasury function, not being able to monitor transactions, and ultimately have losses and have issues in terms of various sub treasury transactions. So this is one example. example. The other example, again on the bribery side, is a recent one. I mean, a couple of years maybe. This is against Cognizant. It's a Nasdaq listed company. It failed to have internal controls over the payments that were made in order to get real estate set up, in order to get their infrastructure set up. So Cognizant probed whether certain payments relating to facilities flouted the US FCPA regulation. So why all these come into picture is because management has an interest to drive and grow the business, because ultimately the promoters, the founders of the company or the management have direct or indirect interest in the growth of the organization, and in that process sometimes they flout the regulations, sometimes they oversee important checkpoints, and they go against the interest of the stakeholders. And that's where corporate governance regulation comes in and says, well, I know you want to do this, I know you want to grow the business, but you have to do it right. Otherwise there are implications on the stakeholders. So this point has been touched upon in the previous discussion with Lakshmi just a couple of minutes back. But the point here is this will assume a lot of importance in the coming few years. There are a lot of complicated structures being created, legal structures, subsidiaries, group entities. Globalization is taking it's a whole new meaning. Companies coming in, companies going out, getting listed, getting funded. So all this is creating so many complex structures that it's very easy for any promoter with a bad intent to do related party transactions, which will go under the scanner, will not get detected for the next 5-10 years, and then suddenly something big happens, and then it gets detected. So because the environment is so complex, the regulation is not able to catch it properly, and we are trying to tweak things, change the related party definition. Who is a related party? Is it your blood group? Your blood related persons? Is it someone extended? What is a related party transaction? What falls in these definitions? So they're trying to widen the definition. The fallback is if you make the definition very wide, then you have compliance issues. Then you have people flouting against the regulations, trying to avoid high cost of compliance. Always have to disclose unwanted small transactions. So there's always a pro and con in that. Things like lowering materiality again will make cost of compliance very high. And then putting responsibility on the audit committee to approve these related party transactions. So the point on this slide essentially is that related party transactions scrutiny or the review and the regulation around this will be extremely high over the next several years. And as the definitions, as this law gets implemented, whenever it does, it's going to have far-reaching implications because this is an area where it is highly complex due to the legal structures, due to the mechanisms of doing different types of transactions, whether it's financial instruments, whether it is investments, tax evasions, profit, moving profits here and there. Many things are there, and this kind of takes up a lot of importance. There was a recent event which came into the news quite a bit on Indigo. This was around undisclosed related party transactions. So there was a very strong company, good founders, but the differences cropped up, and it all came due to one of the founders allegedly having related party transactions, and investigation happened and things like that. So the point again on this slide is not so much about Indigo on its own, but it's really about what is in the interest. Sometimes the interest of the other founders are also at stake. There are two people who have created a business. One of them benefits more due to related party, and the other one is then deprived of the growth benefits or the other benefits of the organization. So again, clearly an important area. Related party is getting a lot of focus. Then the last slide that we have essentially is anti-bribery. So why we keep coming back to anti-bribery is because anti-bribery is an area which is also well regulated from many angles, many countries, as Lakshmi had mentioned. So on this slide, you can see, what are the things we need to take care of. There are standard frameworks. There are certification frameworks out there. We need to build strong auditing and monitoring systems. If there's a specific incident that is made aware of, that someone has given a bribe, whether it's small or large, those have to be reported. So we need a strong incident reporting management process. Uh, so if you see this slide, it has all the indicators and all the elements of preventive controls, monitoring controls, and governance controls, and as well as auditing. So your KRIs become, and red flags kind of become your preventive measures. Your board reporting, incident reporting kind of becomes detective controls. You detect something and then you manage that process. So this is a good example of a well-governed anti-bribery framework. Similarly, you could have this for related party. You could have this for any other types of internal tools and mechanisms of a company. Everything will have a preventive element, monitoring element, and essentially a wholesome and all-rounded corporate governance framework. So I think that's about it from my side. Now, Lakshmi, if you have anything else to add, or we can just quickly check with the audience if there's any specific question they have when it comes to
I think
what are the directions of
we can.
corporate governance, or where are we heading?
I think we should see if there is any question, and while answering those questions, we can take up the points in an elaborate manner.
Yeah.
It is Mona Lisa is there.
So there's one question. We have independent director for IT strategy committee. Does experience or skill of independent director, is it mandatory or optional?
See, it's a IT strategic committee. It's a normal corporate. So in a normal corporate, I'm not sure if this is a committee regulated by any act. It must be an internal IT strategy committee, and it is upon the corporate to decide the criteria of the members of this IT strategic committee. There is no regulation prescribing the criteria, but of course, for getting the best benefit from the committee and the best contribution in the committee, it is preferable that the independent directors have the adequate knowledge from the IT perspective, so that those skills can be used to make judgments and contribute to the committee. There is no regulation as such.
Yeah. So then the next question is the recent crypto apps frauds. What measures you think can be taken? So the recent crypto apps frauds. So what are the measures that we can take?
Would you like to take up this, or?
I mean, yeah. So one point that we can take here is, independent of what type of a fraud it is, whether it's a crypto app or whether it's anything to do with fraud. Ultimately, what we are trying to address is the fact that are there mechanisms in place to prevent this from. Ultimately, a company is governing internal systems, not so much on the external side of it. So if you're talking about external frauds, then of course the management is not so much responsible. But on the internal side, whether it's any type of fraud, ultimately there's a mechanism of fraud prevention, and that's the responsibility of the board and the management to manage those and mitigate the risks of fraud. Yeah.
Any other question? From the cryptocurrency perspective, maybe one point I would like to add, like as of now, like in India, after Supreme Court judgment, cryptocurrency is considered to be valid. A trade in the cryptocurrency, RBI cannot stop that. Now, because now cryptocurrency is as usual in India, but still RBI and other regulators, including banks, are advised to take utmost care in dealing with that. The reason being that most of the player in the cryptocurrencies are found to be with the characters having terrorists or the murderers, extremists. So that's where the RBI always and government always had the concern that because of the nature of the players in cryptocurrency, there can be further vulnerability from a money laundering perspective.
Yeah. And one point to you, Lakshmikant, from my side is, globally there are indexes getting created on corporate governance. So companies
Yeah,
are getting rated based on the state of corporate governance. So,
yeah.
company A might be rated 90%, company B might be rated 30% based on its practices and all. So do you think that is a feasibility in India? Is it coming in some shape, or would it
Yeah,
come? Is it
yeah,
necessary?
yeah. It is coming in even National Stock Exchange. In fact, that was on my radar. I've skipped saying that by mistake. On National Stock Exchange, there is a separate rating. National Stock Exchange has come up with a separate rating of each of those top 500 companies listed with it. And this rating is done by the experts into this area. So that is already out. And in fact, with more and more such rating is done by the Indian authorities, definitely it will get acceptance over the time. So it's just building up, and it was an initiative of National Stock Exchange itself. In fact, NSE has a one index also, NSE some ESG index, which has a governance also one of the piece.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's it in terms of questions. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating and joining this session. Sorry again for the last minute changes and cancellations, but it was unavoidable, and hence we had to step in to take this session. If there's any question, we can always pass it down to the original speaker and get any feedback and response. Thank you very much. So let's conclude the call then. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you
Okay.
very
Thank
much.
you. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.